clinical assistant professor in the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition. I've been following my master's work, which was, again, completely unrelated to anything physical, which was looking at liver disease in infants of low birth weight with gastrointestinal issues. So that really relates well to powerlifting, squatting, deadlifting. So a little bit about myself. So I'm a competitive powerlifter. I've been competing since about 2007. All the provincial records I basically hold, and that's only because there's nobody else my age in my weight category, really. So it's really not all that special, but it looks good on paper. I'm also the vice president of the Saskatchewan Powerlifting Association. So part of what I'd like to do today too, and it's not necessarily related to the class, but that's also if there are folks that are interested in looking at, well, what is competitive powerlifting? I'd love to talk to you about it. And we've got a meet coming up here in Saskatoon, February 21st. If anybody wants to come and check it out to see what's a competition look like, let me know and I can connect you. So I don't have enough to do, I'm also an assistant powerlifting coach at Synergy Strength. So there's 4 of us that kind of share that load, and we're all competitive lifters and kind of team coach, if you will. So what I'd like to do today is, and kind of just briefly talking with Bart about this, and that is kind of walk through squatting and deadlifting from a powerlifting perspective. So just to frame it a little bit, so powerlifting is like maximum weight for a singular repetition, meeting all of the specific criteria for the execution of that lift. So for the squat, we have very specific execution pieces on depth, knee lockout, start, finish, following commands, all of that business. I'm not necessarily going to get into that with you guys because I don't know that there's value for that. But the execution pieces that we're hopefully going to try and touch on are some of these pieces of like the overall tightness in the body to be able to handle a fairly significant weight safely. And these are things that, as you guys kind of work through whatever you're going to do in your profession, they transcend movement, whether they be the squat, the deadlift, picking up a box off the floor, helping your buddies move, like all of that kind of thing. So starting with the squat itself, these are the things that I really want to try and hammer home, and that's that overall upper body tightness, core tightness, setting a shelf for that bar to rest in and pulling it in. Things like the lats, engaging the lats. You will engage in all of the movements, in whether you're a CrossFitter, just a general strength athlete, track athlete, training in general with weights, same items as far as wanting to make sure that your core is tight, the upper back is tight to support the lower body and safety. Chest up, creating that column. We're going to talk about bar position. So there's a bunch of things, whether you're a high bar squatter or a low bar squatter. Typically powerlifters are low bar squatters, lowering that center of gravity. You don't have to be. There's a number of very successful lifters that are high bar squatters. I want to take as much advantage as possible, and the bar is low for me. Hands, where you put them on the bar to create that tension and that shelf. Head position, depends if you follow guys like Mark Ripito or not, where it's almost like what he calls neutral, but it's almost a head down. For me, I also played football back in the 80s. You know, I was athletic positioning the head up and the body following the head. So there's different cues for different lifters, and hopefully we'll get a chance to work through this stuff. Foot position's a big thing too, and we talked a little bit about that Bart and I before. I understand you guys are basically somewhere around shoulder width. I'm an ultra wide squatter. I'm out here. I'm very much a posterior or chain or hip squatter versus some folks are more for the quad or knee squatters. So there's things that we're going to work through. Again, trying to activate the posterior chain. You can move a heck of a lot more weight using your hips than you can loading the quads. Weight transfer so that you're not on the balls of the feet with the knees tracking forward. So, and sitting back, that first movement. So a lot of things I find with even folks that are coming over from the CrossFit world into our powerlifting world in our class, I ask them, so how are you with your squat technique? Oh, my squat techniques, yeah, it's good. I've been doing this for so long. And, okay, well, typically I start folks off on all the same, so unloaded bar, I'll watch you move. And invariably, people tend to unlock the knees first. They get into this position instead of hinging back, right? So it's they're very similar themes. We're going to look at some drills that I find successful with some of the athletes that I work with, and that is like box squats. I find box squats very, very, very helpful in teaching that sit back, that first move, the unhinging of the hip versus unlocking of the knee. And then depending on other things where if some people are getting a little bit, let's say, loose, if you will, in the core, in the bottom of the lift, or in the hole, if you will, of the squat, there's some pause squats and things where you get not super heavy, but they teach you that tension in the bottom so that you're safe and able to come up out of the hole with the weight. Equipment, I didn't bring a bunch of stuff, but like a belt's a belt. And there's varying, I would say, there's a couple schools of thought, at least in the competitive world. Like the Norway guys, the top IPF lifter right now, Carl Ingmar Christensen, those guys wear a belt through from their one plate warm up all the way up. Whereas a lot of what we tend to do around in our world here is we tend to not put on the belt, trying to work the core until it's like, well, I need to wear the belt so that I can actually help support my hips and core. You guys aren't using belts, but they are, if you use one, use it. It's not contraindicated. I think belt has a role, particularly in maximum weight.
So are you able to lift more weight because of wearing the belt?
Oh, absolutely.
And what's the reason for that?
Well, it's just that overall core tightness and support. Because when you actually, for me, when you load up a weight, I'm actually expanding my middle through that transverse abdominis, the rectus, the whole thing. So I'm actually trying to create more tension in here so that when I take that weight out of the rack, I set that all through here. And without that to push against, I don't have the same amount of ability to move the same amount of weight. And unequipped, I also lift equipped and unequipped. So meaning raw, which is belt and knee sleeves. And I also use the goofy polyester suits and stuff too to make you look like you're a hero. But the same principles, right? Unequipped, I can lift at least another 20 pounds in a belt, in a squat.
And would you say the belt is it's kind of adding an external transverse abdominis?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what from what I've read about the theory. The main thing is being able to use it properly. A lot of people will put on a belt, they'll cinch it super tight, and then they can't actually even breathe. And I've seen, there was one of the guys in 2012 that I lifted with that got hurt because he over-tightened his belt on his third attempt, and he couldn't expand his abdomen into the belt to support his core. Yes?
So when you're using a belt and using it to lift more weight,
Yep.
I understand that you're using it to support your core. With that added weight, what's the feedback on the rest of the joints in the body that don't have that support? Like, how's that extra weight affecting that? Is there a higher rate of injury, do you find? Like, what are some injuries that you've experienced? And why do you think you have?
Why have I? Well, okay, so historically me, I'm a muscle tearer. I've torn, I don't know how many things. I think there's theory, my personal theory, there's two types of folks. There's people that compromise their joints because of tight ligaments. There's people that will compromise their bodies because they're tight muscle. I'm tight muscle. Why have I hurt myself? I think it's because I'm old. So to that point, I mean, there is a point to where you will, like if it's you hurt your hip because you got your belt on and you can squat another 20 pounds. I mean, to me, it really comes down to the training and the preparation for that. So, like, it's a bit hard to say that you're going to hurt yourself because you can do another 20 pounds. Most times people's cores, because of, again, adults, our lifestyles, we're seated most of the day, our cores aren't as strong as they should be. Does that mean that you throw on a belt because your core is weak? Absolutely not. You have to train that core to make sure that it's able to support you and keep you safe and complete the lift. But like, it's a really tough question to answer, and I think it comes back to, in my opinion, having that well-rounded training program so that you are physically prepared for that 20 pounds extra, and you're not going to hurt a knee or a hip or your shoulders, for example, carrying another 40 pounds. So it has to come down to the structure of the program in mind. Good question. Okay. Yeah, let's go squat. So however you guys, we've got 5 cages. So partner up, and I think what we'll do is I'd like, you guys are all going to squat huge weight today. And as you start, I want to talk about your footwear and things like that too. Squatting, all powerlifting, but squatting in particular, if you have a soft sole, a soft heel, you get to any kind of significant weight. I've seen a number of guys, particularly the guys that are lifting and with a CrossFit shoe or a cross trainer. It's actually scary because I've seen them come out of the rack with the weight and you can see all kinds of movement because it's a soft sole shoe. I am a huge proponent of a solid sole shoe for squatting. A, you'll be able again to lift more if you think about energy absorption into a soft cushion. B, your stability is night and day. I used to, when I first started, lifting in like a Chuck Taylor or like a Converse All-Star type shoe, with a very gummy sole. And then I went to a more traditional Olympic lifting shoe with a little heel lift. Night and day difference as far as the stability to be able to actually execute the move. So even folks with like a flat shoe or those minimalist shoes, great for deadlifting. Depending on your flexibility and the way that you move, may or may not be ideal for squatting. And that's some of the stuff that we can work through. Yep.
Kind of gotten some heated debates as to whether or not you should wear shoes or not. I'm just curious what your take is on
For
that.
squatting?
Any like deadlift squat?
Well, okay, so deadlifting's a little different story, right? Purely because, well, I'm a conventional deadlifter, meaning like that type of stance versus sumo. So the shoe requirements of footwear is a little different. When I train 100% in a sock. I don't train in a shoe like with any lift. I don't want to move the weight any further than I have to. Like if we're talking about trying to pull 600-pound deadlift, I don't want to have to move it another ½ inch because that's like show over that ½ inch. Versus if I'm in like a flat, again, it's that stability against the floor. Some people do run into some foot problems in their arch. So you do have to, I mean, there's some personal tailoring, if you will. I have no problem, I think it's reasonable to deadlift in like a minimalist shoe. You never want to deadlift in a heeled shoe. Just contradict, it doesn't make sense, right? But, I mean, barefoot deadlifting, okay. I think there's reasonable argument for that. Barefoot squatting, if you're stable, maybe. Like, there's more than one way to skin the cat, right? There's always a bunch of ways to be able to achieve an outcome. And everybody is individual. Should you never squat like in a minimalist shoe or just a barefoot or sock foot? Well, okay, if your mechanics are good, you could probably do it. If your arches aren't bothering you, you end up with other foot issues, okay. I think it's much better to have a proper supportive shoe. So there's all kinds of deadlift shoes you can buy that provide that arch support and foot support. I deadlift in a ballet slipper because I didn't bring it because it would just be, not very manly. but it's purely because I don't want to move the weight any further than I have to. But for, go ahead.
It comes to show you're required to wear shoes.
Yeah, you have to wear shoes. So, like, depends on the federations, right? So there's a ton of federations for competitive powerlifting. We're IPF, or International Powerlifting Federation, affiliated. So we're drug tested. We've got, like, the rules are crazy. Because the ultimate goal of the IPF is to become an Olympic sport powerlifting. That's their. I don't think it'll ever get there. I don't think they'll ever have two weightlifting types of competitions in the Olympics, but that's my opinion. Nice goal. But depends. So yeah, our rules are it has to be an indoor sport shoe. So you can't wear like the 5-toe type shoes. But as long as it's an enclosed shoe, like in a ballet slipper qualifies, you can wear that kind of thing. So you ready to squat? Cool. Let's go. Now, and also what Bart was talking about using your phones. Like, I think that is such a valuable teaching tool. There's some, and I don't know if you've talked about software like Coach's Eye and stuff.
Couple
like
apps,
that.
yeah.
Like that is so valuable to be able to, like, people get a little crazy with it and post it on YouTube and like, oh, look how really awesome, right? But using it as a coaching tool, it's invaluable. You can see so much and you can connect how it feels and how it looks, and can make a real difference. And obviously your partners need that too. So let's check it out.
Sore from leg?
Yeah, on Monday.
Still from Monday? That sounds like a
Are you
good
getting
workout.
this on camera?
Yes, I am.
No, her leg.
Leg day. I'll edit all this. Don't worry. It's gonna be Bruce Willis taught us powerlifting today.
So, have you guys talked much about what an appropriate warm-up is to prepare yourself to squat?
Not
so much?
specifically, no.
Okay, so I mean, like you're involving your whole body, right? So like no different than the bench press or the deadlift. I'm a big proponent of like foam rolling. I love foam rolling. So glutes, lower back, down the hips, quads, hamstrings. I foam roll everything. I don't do a huge amount of pre-workout stretching. I do most of my stretching after, but just making sure that you're warm and obviously able to execute the movement safely. But I'm sure with time we got to kind of move on. Make sure that you guys are ready to kind of even move, because as you get older, it takes a little longer. But yeah, the other thing too is ankle mobility. I find that's a big limit for some folks, and that's why a lot of us end up wearing more of a heel lift than others. So ankle mobility, hip mobility. Make sure you're good and warm. Get your hips warm so that whatever we're going to do today nobody ends up with a negative outcome. All right. So I guess let's attack the weights. So try and set up, like partner up with folks that are roughly the same height as you, so you can set up your rack heights. So as you do that, what I'd like to do is I want to watch each one of you move, and then we're going to talk about some things. If maybe your movement's perfect, and that's great. And then we'll talk about some of those things, like how to incorporate a box squat into it.
Oh, you lift up and then
sec, guys. So like this is what I would call as a relatively high bar position. How flexible are your shoulders? So right there, this is what I would call as a low bar position. And if you can, I don't know if you can see or not, but like it's sitting basically just below the upper trap and on the posterior delts. That's that shelf that I was talking about. So in this position, this is really good. Like the tension in here is ideal. So like this position right here is where I would like, that is an ideal powerlifting squat bar position with that upper back nice and tight, head up, lats are actually engaged, so that bar is almost pulled into that shelf so that we've locked that column. That's an ideal. So depending on, yeah. But I say there's not a wrong way, like high bar or low bar. There's two ways to do it. Personally, I have a heck of a hard time locking my upper back in a high bar. Like it's just sitting on top, because when I want to get tight for when I'm starting to squat some really heavy weight, to get that tension, I want to pull that bar in. As part of that overall core chest high, that bar is pulled into there. I can't do it up top. The other thing too is, depending as you get heavier with the weight, as you're coming down and you come out of the hole, a lot of times with that high bar, if you're not tight, you'll end up in this position. You cannot recover with a high bar, you dump it. Like you will go forward with that weight, and that is not a good thing. And again, whereas that bar, if you're locked in that low bar position, that ability of, even if you come up a little bit, you're still got the ability to get that back and stay tight.
So a high bar is more up on the trap?
It's up on the traps. Yep.
When you're instructing squatting first, why don't you start with the front squat?
Well, I'm biased. Because of the way I squat, like I'm an ultra low bar guy, and I beat the crap out of my shoulders over my life, from football to this. I personally can't front squat. Like to carry the bar, because of the way that I squat, which is that wide stance. I'm not an Ole guy with a narrow stance. Front squat, like I can carry, but as soon as I get, because with the upper body lean that I have, how to carry that weight out here, just to carry any weight to get a workout, I just can't support the weight out here. It tends to fall out. Doesn't mean it isn't valuable, but that's just like, for me personally, I just can't do it. There's a lot of, like my oldest daughter's also a competitive lifter. She does like squats overhead as part of her warm-up. She also does some of the goblet squats. So those are good things if you can actually, like, as far as part of the warm-up. But I back squat, 100%.
So if you're coaching and you know that if you recognize that someone would maybe benefit more from a front squat, would you suggest for them to do that, or you're just a strictly no?
Well, but so if we think of so sports specific, so like our coaching is for powerlifting. So if they're proficient at a back squat, which most new folks aren't, even if they have a ton of history, the focus is to become proficient and safe in executing that lift. If it gets to a point where we need to add in things, if we start to notice that there's a weakness of pitching forward or other things, then we can start to implement other things to address that. But I mean, first and foremost, from a sport-specific perspective, I tend to address, like, let's make sure that you can execute a back squat, because that's what we want. That's, at the end of the day, what you need to do.
I think from some of the history of looking at, say, the football players, when I was coaching offensive linemen, we did back squats, but after a while I was like, it makes so much more sense body position wise, what they have to do in the football field. We brought in probably, I would say we were close to half of what they were asked to do as front squats. Now the problem was, what happens when they cannot get in that position? They didn't have the shoulder flexibility. Well, we'd have supplemental programs to change the flexibility, but what do you do in the meantime until they can actually carry the weight? So, and also there's a difference in the magnitude of the load that you can front squat, right? And at the end of the day, what's going to be the biggest thing that's going to help that football player? Front squat, back squat. Well, they don't do either one on the field, so in some ways, do what they're proficient at and what fits their body. The trunk length to femur length makes a huge issue in who can front squat and who shouldn't. Cam Rattle, who was a 6'6" kid and flexible, front squat was a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Ben Heenan, he's a back squat guy. He's a short trunk guy.
So like you hit on it absolutely, Bart. That femur length to waist length or trunk length, huge in the execution of the squat. My waist is about that long between the crest of my hip and the bottom of my ribs. That's probably from compression, but it's that long. Whereas there's some guys that are that I train with they got their femurs are about this long and their trunk is like this. They are bolt upright squatters. They can front squat darn near what they can back squat. And for me, just again, because of mechanics and the way that I squat and some of the other history, whether they be physical limitations and just the way I'm built, I don't get anything of it. I can't carry the load.
Could you imagine a long trunk length person front squatting where the weight's out in front and they're
dead.
Like, just think about how difficult that would be as opposed to the short trunk person who can stay upright. Does that make sense? Like, it would be, I should have been a front squat guy.
Yeah,
short legs.
Yeah, see, I'm relatively, I'm all leg. Like I should have been 6 foot. I'm 5'8".
See, I'm all, actually, you know what? I think our leg length isn't much different. I'm all back.
Yeah. So that's where looking at the way the athlete or the individual moves, and then if it's performance specific towards powerlifting, so how do you then manipulate the movement, the foot position, all the cues, the bar position, how do you change that? Because if the goal, again, just from my perspective, if the goal is to maximum 1 rep movement on the platform, then how do we adjust that so that person can execute that lift? From a general training perspective, if they are of a different physical makeup, if you will, lever lengths and all, to be able to incorporate other lifts. So because I can't front squat, would I use, I don't know if you guys know what a safety bar is? Yeah, it has the handles out front here, the bar sits up on the traps, perfect. Same net effect, gets the bar up high, really hammers my core and upper back. Yeah.
So when you're training, are you training specifically people for
for competition?
Or is it general public? And how do your programs differ?
Well, we have a bit of both. The vast majority of the folks that we have are competitive lifters, even if they're still your average person. They still because you're only competing against yourself, right? It's not against whoever's the world champion, whatever. But we do have a lot of both. So the programming is very much, even for example, the squat depth. For us, we have to break parallel, right? So my hips are below my knees. For the guy I was working with last night, just he wants to be able to get back in shape and backpack a 50-pound pack for a hike in the summer. Well, he doesn't have to break parallel. I don't need to take him to that level. Do I want him to squat to parallel? Absolutely. Right? Because you guys are familiar with the knee injuries with partial squats and all that business. Because right? Oh yeah, I can 600 pounds. Great. Maybe not. Right? But so it very much depends on what their goal is. And we have different programs themselves for base training and then also competitive for that peak. So if that person, unless they want to do a test, so they can have their own test meet, we can find out where they are if they're interested. It really is tailored to that person as far as what they want to do. And then we also tailor, you have your basic movements, your big 3 lifts, right? Squat, bench, and your deadlift. But there's a bunch of variations around that. And then there's also a whack of accessory movements that we would kind of mean loosely, prescribed for that person based on how we're watching them lift and where we're identifying weaknesses and things that need to get tweaked. Yep. So it is not a cookie cutter. I personally don't believe in cookie cutters. Yeah, like you have to adjust it for that person, whether it's you still squat, but whether it's a safety bar, whether it's a front squat, whether it's a wide stance, narrow stance, like it's all of that stuff in together. You bring all those tools to your client. Cool. All right. Let's see some movements. So there's the squishy heels right there. Yeah. So one of the other things, if you like, what's your name? Adam. So guys, just watch Adam for a sec. Go ahead, Adam. Let's stop. See, look at where his knee position is relative to his feet. So again, trying like powerlifting. Yeah, I know you're. How long can you hold that isometric? But trying to, one of our goals from a mechanistic perspective is trying to keep the knees within the foot. Like you don't have to, like I squat almost with a vertical shin. I don't think everybody can do that, nor do I think it's necessarily the right way always. That's how I move. Having some knee travel, as long as it stays within the foot, is fine. Again, this guy I was working with last night, he squats like straight, like if I was to drop a marble, like just straight down, there was no hip. But this is how he ended, this is where his bottom was. The guy was super flexible in the Achilles because he had a flat shoe. But seriously, his knees, he was this low and his knees were out here. So where's all the point force? Like right now, this is hurting me. Right here, right? So if you think about just mechanistically, when you want to, with your squat, trying to keep the shins in relative perpendicular to the floor and get that transfer onto the hips. Like this doesn't, I could sit here for a long time. This doesn't bother my knees at all.
That external rotation plays a huge role in that, as opposed to remember what Andrew talked about yesterday or the day before, keeping the feet straight and being relatively narrow? It really doesn't apply, and it doesn't apply for someone like you for squatting, because you would never keep that close to vertical lower leg.
So for me to squat like this, oh boy, there's that is just so uncomfortable.
In your defense, though, haven't you trained that motor, like this motor pattern way more than you trained this?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And that's why it's not wrong. I would never take a lifter who squats comfortably and proficiently in a shoulder width stance and say, you have to squat wide. I would never do that. And in fact, I think the way I actually squat when I'm like in my equipped, which is about that wide, I don't know that that's actually that good. I mean, just because of how much now, like rotation and force that is in my hips, like it takes the hit, like that takes a real beating. If I was to maybe, now it's been like 30 years of squatting, so would I ideally be a little narrower? Yeah, probably.
So why did you pick wide?
And you know what? It is just I have so along with all the I've blown a disc in my back playing football and all a bunch of other things. So post injury, I found that for me to be able to get any depth out of my squat, there's a limit. Like I can't get depth out here because I'm now bound. But if I'm here, I found that I can keep my back in a good position. I can load the hips properly with a wider stance versus a narrow, because if I get, so here's where I am, here. I'm not getting out of here with 500 pounds. I can definitely get out of here with 500 pounds.
So you see, it's sort of transferring the load.
It's
By being
100% transfer.
So, and your hips are the strongest.
Yeah.
Now you're at the point where maybe not so great for your hips either, but to be narrower, it transfers it more to his back, and for sure you already know what's going to happen with your back.
Yeah, like see, I'm trying to take the load off my lumbar because I know it's a touchy point. So over time, I said, okay, here's what feels natural to me automatically. Even when I played ball, I was a defensive back. My natural stance when I was in man-to-man coverage, I don't know if you guys are too young. Lester Hayes used to play for the Oakland Raiders. He was here. That was my natural. I gravitated to a wider stance even back in the football days. So again, it's not, I would never change anybody from one to the other unless I'm seeing, if I'm seeing somebody who's a narrow squatter and they're doing this, okay, we got some work to do. And that's where I would build in that box squat, play with foot position, play with bar position, head position, leading with the hips.
So just so we're moving along here, so if
Yeah.
we've got Adam here, and when he got to 90 or slightly below, started to have that butt wink.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you see that?
Again, for me personally, it depends on the magnitude of the butt wink. That's actually a really tough one to fix. And there's the amount that I've kind of read online about how to address that butt tuck. Some folks say it's not a big deal, but to me it depends on how much of that lumbar flexion occurs at that bottom position. So whether it's a flexibility issue in the hamstring, glutes, lower back, all of the above, or is it just, you know what, like you're burying this thing, your butt's hitting your ankles. So you know what, let's pull that up a little bit. You don't need to go that deep. So again, it's pretty dependent and trying to address those things. So in some of the folks that I work with who have a big butt wink, I'll go, okay, so let's just do a little test. Like put your leg up. I want to see what your testable hamstring flexibility, test some glute flexibility, like rotation in the hips, see like where the issues lie, and see if that's what's contributing to that tuck. Yep.
So, sorry.
Why apologize?
Oh no, I'm just delaying.
Dominating.
Well, no, and then like there's all sorts of lifters who they'll take videos of them doing a squat without a belt and then doing a squat with a belt.
Yep.
And their tailbone tuck is completely different. Be it like versus one versus the other, they'll have it without and it'll be like, oh my gosh, you should not be going that low. That looks like it's putting so much stress on your lumbar versus throw a belt on and it's so much better. So like, how is that any better actually for like your for your body? If you're,
How is what
like,
actually better?
like how throwing on a belt when you have such a bad.
You don't like belts?
I don't like belts because I just don't think that like you're engaging your core properly. And so when you're like, there's the difference.
Absolutely. Like I don't think we're necessarily at opposite ends.
No.
Because I think people need to, if you're going to use a belt, you need to know how to use it. It's like any other piece of equipment. You have to know how to use it properly versus throwing it on every time and you cinch it up and you got your no sleeve shirt and you're walking around and everything's looking great. Right? But I mean, but using it properly versus, like that's why, like for me personally, like I don't put on a belt until I get to a certain point in my progression of my training that I actually think, well, you know what, from a stability and safety perspective, I need to put it on. Whereas all through the sets leading up to that, it is belt free, and I do the vast majority of my training off season without a belt.
Would you feel comfortable loading somebody who has such a big difference between a belt and without a belt, like between wearing a belt and without a belt? Would you feel comfortable like loading them with a considerable load while wearing a belt, whereas like without, there's a large difference between the tailbone tuck?
Well, that's a bit hard to answer because I don't load people who I'm not comfortable with at all.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, if somebody's doesn't have a good motor pattern, I won't load them past that. In fact, I'll take the weight down, and that's where we incorporate things like that. Like if it's a sitting back, which a lot of like the butt tuck thing, you can cure it if you're cueing properly. versus getting in here. So, like if I'm now tucked my butt, like where's my back tension? Where's my core tension? 0, right? There's a lot of these things can be fixed by setting that bar and cueing and boom. Like I might have had a little tuck, but that's because I'm like 2-3 inches below parallel. But I would never load anybody who doesn't have a pattern or say, here, throw on a belt and fix it. Like that's a Band-Aid approach, and I think you need to find out, so what's actually behind what you're seeing.
See, and that might lead you to believe that it's a core stability, and not that they don't have core stability, but they're not firing it adequately enough.
Yeah.
So, because if they can do it with the belt, again, what's the belt doing? And what's happening to the spine when they do butt wink? Like it's bringing flexion in, especially to the lumbar area. So,
Yeah.
the only way for you to have flexion to the lumbar is something's happening through here. Like that's just, now again, it's like we talked about the FMS stuff. There's your starting point maybe for correction. And we'll know if that works by how they respond.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't work, then let's try another strategy. Or we just say, you know what, we don't need to go deeper than that. Happy with that.
So what's the goal with that person? If it's to get them on a platform for a max rep single, I'm not messing around with that form. Like that's got to be good. Whereas if it's average person who's just trying to get stronger, activities of daily living, right? They don't need to be, like butt to ankles, and introduce any of that butt weight. Maybe taking them again, like to a. So if I'm having trouble with keeping my butt from winking past parallel, there's nothing wrong with that squat, right? I mean, from a depth perspective, like that's as long, again, the movement is I'm not unlocking my knees first, I unhinge at the hip.
And if you're looking at, say, the guys that Josh and Brad work with, or Jason, the hockey players, is that a good investment of time trying to fix a butt wink that happens below 90 or at 90?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
With, like if you're on the football field or any sport, soccer, whatever, how many times are you below parallel in your sport? If you are, you're probably on your backside, right? Because somebody's now knocked you over. Like you have no leverage down there for a football player when we're here, right? Hockey, same thing. Like if you're down here, you are doing something else, probably sitting on the bench, right? So like, I mean, if you're looking about sports specificity, I don't, from a purely athletic perspective, there's really no need to crack parallel, I don't think. And I would never take anybody there just for the sake of, well, that's the right way to do it. Well, not really. Like, let's think about what that person needs to achieve. And if a parallel squat with good technique is meeting it, or even a little bit above, as long as we're not seeing this type of motion, I don't have any problem with that.
So another question. So I was talking about just like powerlifting athletes, but if you're talking about a general athlete, so like a football player, would you say throwing a belt for that squat? Like if you want to push that weight, like where would you say no, keep that weight down? I want you to be able to, like where you kind of draw the line?
These hypotheticals are
yeah.
tough. Well, no, because like I can tell you what I do. Okay, so as a competitive lifter, I don't put on a belt till about I'm past about 85% of my 1 rep max. And that seems to be pretty reasonable. I can achieve my working sets if I'm working at 80 to 85%, which is like how I train is percentage based. 80 to 85% for multiple sets of 3 to 4 reps. I don't typically need a belt. But if I'm going to start getting north of 85, maybe it might even be more mental, because now I've got that extra security and tightness. It definitely helps me at the 1 rep max. Is it playing a role 90%? Maybe a little bit, but it might be more mental in that tightness. But it does not preclude the fact that you need to engage the core properly and you need to train it. And whether that is part of your system by using belt-free movements. Like I rarely deadlift with a belt. In fact, probably 99.9% of my training for deadlift, I do not use a belt. I don't need it. Because I can get into this position with my hips. Like, it's not doing a whole lot, again, until I start getting to that 95+%. Will I even think about should I put on a belt today or not? And that's twice a year that I probably get to that kind of percentage load. So folks that rely on a belt probably need to work on things without a belt, because it may be a bit of a mask for other issues. Yeah. How much time do we have?
We are till technically, yeah, we're about half an hour.
Okay. Well, let's just do it. I want to, like, I've seen Adam move, so I want to see some of you other guys squat.
That was well done, Adam.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Oh, that'd be somebody.
Where do you feel it when you're in that low bar squat? Is it thoracic?
Low bar?
Yeah.
Actually my shoulder.
Shoulders?
Yeah.
Closer to your deltoid.
You're gonna get a box for me.
So when he said perfect,
Yeah.
it was, oh, we got something to talk about. Which is good, yeah.
Just squat to that. I want to see what kind of height is. Well, just even without it is fine. Just your normal setup.
Yeah.
That's not bad. Your movement is 100% different with the blocks already. Yeah. So
When
like
you
you're
got-
sitting back. Where as soon as you, like when you
Forward
got
lean
to,
was huge
as soon as
without
you
the
got
box.
to like here, all of a sudden you shift forward.
Yep.
And that is like folks that are trying to hit a certain depth. That is one of the most common issues you see. Is it and get to here, then all of a sudden, whoop.
You'll find a way to get there,
Yeah.
but it's not right.
But actually, like in our Fed, there's guys that are getting a little bit short of the femur. They don't have the same mechanics that I would, and where they will get, even though they'll complete the lift, they won't get the white lights for the lift, is because they have that hip slide. So they get to parallel and they think, I got to get to depth, and they think they're deeper, but they're really hip to knee. They're not. So it's something where you really got to think about that hinge and coming back.
Yeah, can you take the box so you can see it? You get down. You're there. It's forward. Okay. Forward. If you don't mind.
How do you feel with the shoes, though?
That actually looked
Yeah.
fairly good, didn't it?
The shoes are such a big part.
Well, we'll see what Chris thinks of it. Yeah.
I saw the low bar and stuff, so the good one. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see it.
I've never been able to squat.
Oh, sure you can.
No, I'm just saying.
You could squat when you were like. Have you ever watched babies squat?
Yes. I mean, as an adult. As an adult.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Oh,
'Cause
high bar.
Well, now that you're saying, like, why? Because I've never, like, a narrow squat, I've never been able to
Yeah.
do it.
So that's
Because my
sure.
But I feel like my lumbar.
Lock it.
So lock. Lock.
Low shelf lock.
Okay.
Now she's thinking way too much.
So.
I am.
So how, like, allow me.
Oh my god.
Now.
Like, there's no shoulders.
No. Tight. Tight. Hand up. Hand up.
You're good. You're good.
There's no shoulders. I can't.
Okay.
Like, I have to rest it there. That's it. Is that, so that's higher, right?
A little bit. It's not bad.
Well, it's not really high, but it's
So.
higher.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So go ahead. So where's your head? So and then again, if you follow
Underneath.
guys like Mark Ripto, he's like his vision is down here, and he's able to do it. There's a number of guys that I compete against that lift that way. I can't, because my body will follow my
Follows
head.
your
So
vision.
how I squat is I find a point on the wall, and it's okay, because now I'm in a line.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm here, I'll tend to, or if I'm looking at myself,
Yeah.
Another one?
Yeah.
I always put the hooks up. because I hate mirrors.
Have you tried the low bar position?
Oh, jeez, I'm getting really red.
I was like, if it's bad, it's bad.
Like, see right there, it looks good. Yeah. As long as you got your, you know the spine of the scap is? That's right where it should be sitting on there. So right there, perfect. Now bring these back, bring your hands in closer. That will help create your posterior delt ledge. That looks better.
So it's just, it's iterative. It's just iterative. Wow, master squat.
But
Those look good.
no, but your back's like harsh. I know. Like
What?
Slow mo.
That's not bad. You feel different?
Yeah. Feels weird.
Weird, yeah. Weird, different, yeah. Not comfortable,
Just kind of different.
yeah.
Makes my hands go
Those
too.
are beauties. A little bit of a butt wink, but not that.
like
Feels way better than.
That looks ideal. So those are, that's one of the like little things too is even that might be a little much.
yeah.
If there was like a 1 1/4 or something that's even thinner. And like honestly guys, if you're gonna squat regularly, like this is a $130 shoe, buy a good shoe. Cross trainer shoes are horrible because they're just a mushy heel. Like I've seen so many guys come out and you can see the rubber squishing around. You do not want an unstable platform to squat on. You just don't. Even if it's like 25 pounds aside. Just stability is so important. You've tightened your core, you've tightened your upper back. Well, everything else that now that you're standing on is like a marshmallow.
Do you want to switch to the deads?
Sure.
I mean, it's up to you. I know there's lots.
Deadlift's my favorite lift. Yeah, sure. Let's go to deads. Any feedback, guys? Like, is that useful? What I'm talking about? Think so? It depends. It's supposed to be is kind of like foot position.
Yeah.
Like for me, like if I'm cold, not warmed up, like this isn't wide enough. Like, cause that's where, like that's where I would be for my first few sets until I'm warm. Where I get though when I'm warm is here, and that's purely because of my shoulder flexibility. I can't get any tighter. A lot of folks will say tighter in close is better. The biggest thing with that is if you're really in here, which is fine as long as you're pulling the bar down into that shelf, that tightness. What I see a lot of folks do who have that a bit of a high bar and their hands are in close is that as they get from here, they'll tend to push up and they'll lose that tightness and they'll roll forward and then they're saying help. So the big thing is if you can be tight in here, you get a fantastic shelf built. The big thing though is pulling it in. So it depends on your shoulder flexibility, where your hands are, and the development of that tightness through the upper back. So there is no right answer. You'll see guys in the big double ply federations that are with the monolith things squatting over 1,000 pounds, well, their hands are way out here. So they trained themselves to be able to keep that tension. So there is no right way, but the big thing is the tightness through that whole torso. You can put your hands wherever they're comfortable, but they have to be able to generate that tightness. Cool. All right. Lifting of the dead. Or you what? Okay, let's watch. Let's watch.
For sure. Casey, let's go.
We'll watch, and we're gonna post it on like the US website.
This is beamed right to YouTube.
Oh. Wow. Awesome.
Okay.
So look at wow, that's awesome. Look at that. One of the things I haven't really talked about, Stacy. Casey's doing is, you see how her knees are out? So a lot of folks that'll end up with like depth issues, again from a competitive perspective, is that they'll end up getting in here, and like this is now like I'm completely bunched up. Like I can't get any deeper than that. And the way that which is ideal, is opening those knees, engaging the hip. Now like I'm sitting right down. Yeah, like you're crazy deep with that.
And that's what Andrew went through when he was who was he working with? Yeah, so working through like on her back, just working for where that kind of natural groove was in the hip.
Yeah.
Right? And you got your groove. Right? You got your groove, right? Which is awesome. What's the one thing last thing on so depth or deep of the hole, and you'll see the lifters actually have a genu valgus. A little bit of a knock knee coming up out of the hole. And the stuff I've read is it's not only sort of reasonable, it actually benefits.
Well, one of the strongest lifters in the world, Rhea Stin, she's out of Moose Jaw. So Rhea holds the unofficial world record in a 72 kilo open class, unequipped, so just belt and knee sleeves, at over 400 pounds. She has unbelievable belts. Like she comes down nice, and as soon as she goes out of the bottom, like her knees are almost touching. It scares the heck out of me, just because I'm going, oh, but like she's able to come out of the hole.
Is that a stability thing for her?
And and she does it. She competes both equipped and unequipped, and she does it the same in both. And she has. I've only seen her miss one lift in that transition point between hip and quad, where you kind of right about here is where that maximum piece is. And I think it's like you are so stable. You're not going to fall down here. Right?
Yeah, because it's not at the very bottom, but it's as they rise up, they creep together, and and I think it's a stability thing. Is kind of what I speculate. But it's weird, right?
Yeah, it's very weird. But say one of the strongest women in the world, she does that very successfully.
And it probably is more exaggerated for females with the Q angle, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, deads.
Deads. Okay. Deadlift. You guys, is anybody a sumo style deadlifter?
Adam, you are, aren't you?
Nope.
No?
Everybody is conventional? Good, because
Adam's
that's
a
the
sumo.
real way to do
I
it.
have no idea.
Right? Not biased. Deadlifting, I think, has probably the greatest carryover to everyday life, right? Because everybody's picking up something off the floor at some point. And anyway, I just think that it's probably one of the lifts that everybody should do in some way, shape, or form. There's a bunch of ways to do it safely, because again, not everybody has the stability or flexibility to be able to pick up a weight off the floor and not have some other back or hip issues or what have you. There's a bunch of ways to incorporate deadlifts safely into anybody's program, in my opinion. So with the deadlift, one of the biggest things from a conventional lifter perspective is what I would call a hip height, and that's a part of the overall positioning. So if I'm, let's put a plate on here that's the right, I just grabbed it. Just so I don't have to bend over further. Thanks. You guys should have saw the stuff that we used to have when I was an athlete with the US for Jimmy Quick. You guys have it pretty good. We bought all ours, actually. I don't know if you remember or not. We used to have the dog pound that was back in the old phys ed gym.
Well, I was
stuff.
telling Adam that when they delivered stuff up here back when the old building was condemned, it was that old stuff.
Oh, the old black line
It was
equipment?
all here.
And did it have still like the pneumatic stuff too?
No, we got rid of that stuff before. Yeah.
Horrible. Anyway, so deadlift positioning, I guess from a conventional perspective, there's lots of ways to do it. Again, foot position, width, I'm like how I do it. I tend to start with the bar kind of across the balls of my feet. I'm not tight up against my shins. And this is stuff that you have to kind of tweak to the individual in their hip mobility primarily. So foot position, or the bar is kind of across the balls of my feet. I use where the knurl starts, I kind of bisect my feet with it. So it's a little bit wider, again, which translates somewhat to my squat. You'll see a lot of folks will be in here. Again, my rationale for having a little bit more width, I don't have to go as far. And then I know we're adding up like 1/16 of an inch. But if I don't have to go that far, then I'll probably be greater chance of being successful in the lift. So from here, the other thing, hand position. So again, trying to make, you want to a certain degree, you want to make your legs short and your arms long. So you'll see a lot of folks that will grab a deadlift bar and they'll be out here. Like, it's okay, but I'm actually pulling my upper body down. So I have to go for it. Whereas, I want that. Now my upper body, like I don't have to go as far. I think you can probably see the difference in my chest height. Deadlift, best thing, or first and most important thing outside of your first approach to the bar is the weight transfer. Deadlifting, particularly conventional, is again, it is 100% posterior chain. So again, for me, my shins are almost perpendicular to the floor, and my balls of my feet are just kind of almost fighting to stay on the floor. I'm almost got 100% of my weight is here. So conversely, if I have the weight forward, my bar path is going to be straight up. You don't want a bar path that is straight up with a deadlift. Any ideas why you don't want a straight up bar path? Why would I say that? Hey?
Sorry, no, I missed the first part of what you're saying.
Oh, like, it's just as far as like if I've got my weight back, which is what I want, versus if I have the weight forward, now my knees are over top of the bar. Where, like, the best I'm going to do is have the weight come straight up. So where's that bar in relation to my thigh? It's off, right? Is the weight heavier further away? Absolutely, right? So when we think about the biomechanics of it, your bar path with a deadlift should actually be slightly back. So if I'm here, so I'm firing my hips. But as soon as I make contact just below my knees, that bar stays against my body the whole way up. So that if I'm out here, if I get separation, pulling me forward, I'm putting a huge load across my lumbar and upper back, whereas if I'm pulling back and tight, the weight stays posterior in there.
I have a question. Regarding kind of the upper body, what I learned like last year is you're supposed to be going down with all your traps and everything pulled up. Do you recommend that, or would you start in like the more rounded versus pulled?
So, just like the squat, as far as that core tension. So what I said earlier about trying to make my arms long, so I'm relaxed, right? My hands are roughly here. How I want to be able to have my core taut, I'm actually pulling down. I'm engaging my lats, chest automatically comes up high. Theoretically, I'm actually getting a little, maybe a quarter of an inch extra length, if you will. But the stability of this is the most important part of all of that. The arm length difference is kind of like just gravy. But the main thing is that tension. So it's the same approach as the squat, except my hands are down here. I build that solid cylinder, and I'm engaging my lats and my pecs, and I'm tight. So now this rigid column is ready to handle some significant weight. So as I approach this, if I'm here and I'm rounded, so you see a lot of, you guys coach at like at the pack? Any of you like watch folks train at the pack doing deadlifts? Okay, so, hey? Yeah. Right? So the application, A, it's not safe. B, the application to the platform, if you're at a maximal weight, and if I am rounded, I'll get the bar to here. I guarantee you I'll get the bar to my knees. I will not be able to bring my hips through unless it's sub-maximal weight. You'll see there's a number of guys that, not necessarily they're in my weight class, but who also compete, and they will have that rounded, and they, oh geez, I have to work more lockouts, I have to do more box pulls or other things because they're failing to lift at the lockout. It's got nothing to do with their lockout strength. It's 100% that they're hunched over. You will not, the hardest part of a conventional deadlift is from here to here. This is kind of that dead zone. So if I'm able to stay tight, backloaded with that weight, I can defeat that dead zone because look where that weight is now. Like it's well within my body's, I don't know, well, it's well within, it's against my body, so it's well within what, from here to here, so it's within my body's line. I'm struggling for the right words. Versus being, if I'm hunched over, I'm coming up straight. It's now out here because you've lost that ability to pull back. So upper body tension, same thing as the squat, down tight, setting that cylinder, weight on the heels. First move is here, pull back. First move is not, you see a lot of folks will do this straight up. First move is back, keeping this position. So when you attack the weight from here, I haven't changed my knee angle, nothing. I save that for the lockout. That first move here, boom.
But isn't that what you see a lot is the so-called experts, when you see them initiating the deadlift, it's their hips extending, but they stay in that trunk forward position.
Yeah.
And so the bar actually is going in a straight line. And I've heard them say the bar should travel in a straight line. And you know, like we were talking before, like some of that thoracic flexion is a lot more acceptable than any sort of lumbar flexion.
Like some of the top deadlifters in the world, there's a couple of Russian guys who have the most ridiculous, Constantino, I don't know if you've seen him deadlift. His thoracic flexion is crazy, but he does not, somehow, he's able to keep his lumbar in proper position with thoracic flexion. I don't know how he does it.
But his thoracic is locked. It's locked, flexed though.
But it's flexed. So, but if you can do it, and
because it makes your arms longer.
Hey?
It makes your arms longer.
Absolutely. If you can do that, great. Like I can't. Like to me, this is a much safer position. I'm solid. So to me, like that first lift, that first movement is the key. Is here and up, finish. So when you crack the floor, that's an acceleration, right? What you don't want to do is to do that. You don't want to try to jerk the weight off the floor. There are some videos you'll see online where they're using a deadlift bar, which is about a 27 millimeter diameter bar. It's a lot longer than your standard 7 foot, and it's soft like a cooked piece of spaghetti. So you can really pull into it and you don't lose all of the energy. You actually pull the flex out of the bar and it'll continue up as it starts to whip, right? You crack the floor and you get some of that transfer. With the bars that we use, which are the Alico powerlifting bars, they are stiff. If you are to take it like this, you're done. You're stopped dead in your tracks. So cracking that floor, then I'm exploding, right? Crack the floor, bang. So that my hips are firing forward, I'm pulling slightly back, I finish tall.
So a lot of similarities in a lot of ways to like a power clean, hip extension and maintaining the position of your back, which again, I just don't see that when I'm watching people deadlift that are, you know, on, again, YouTube, everything's perfect there, right? You know,
even like Powerlifting Watch or Lift, like some of those dedicated things, you'll see some nasty looking lifts. People are strong, but technically, like I would break. But so like those are kind of the keys to the deadlift is really say weight transfer back, starting with a good position, that first move, getting that bar off the floor, and then accelerating, driving your heels through the floor, bringing the hips through, standing tall, locked. So that's hard to execute.
so we will have a chance on Tuesday to actually do the lifts, and again, not trying to set records, but to learn and to learn what to look for. The setup, I think, is we need to perfect that, right? Need to set up, do that perfect, and then things will flow from that.
So there's a few guys at Synergy where I train and coach where their background is Oli, so Olympic lifting, and they try to come over and deadlift. And I see a lot of the Oli style start of the bar. They're actually quite over the bar. Like they're in this type of a position. Yeah, so, and it's really interesting to watch. There's one guy in particular trying deadlift. He's a big man, like he's over 260 some odd pounds. I can out deadlift purely because his starting position, he's in here. That like I can't pull back. I can't load my hips here. Right? Like it's impossible. I'm now coming into my shin.
So you need to shift your weight.
Yeah, like
back.
so for me, I'm trying like talking with him, going like, you gotta get your weight back on the heels. And now you can use the hip. Whereas here, like as soon as I clear here, I'm now separated from the bar. I don't want to be ever separated from the bar.
So is the path of the bar slightly back?
Slightly back.
Yeah.
And that first movement, so one of the key drills that I do, and that there's a lot of movement towards sumo deadlifting, which is fine, for whatever works for the individual. But for the conventional lifters that I work with, one of the key movements is basically pull to knees. So I'm drilling my first move. So here, stay tight. I drill the heck out of that. Because if I can get it to that dead zone and stay tight, I've finished the lift. If I can't get it to here and stay tight, I'm done. So I drill the heck out of pull to knees with that first move here. So that it's coming back. That's why it can't be up against my shins. That's why I have to be backloaded. That first move is here. Then it's me in the bar, like one, versus being over the bar, pulling, you get separation. Biomechanically, the weight's now a whole lot heavier than what's even on the bar for my lumbar. Tougher lift.
With the grip, like do you always do
Unmatched?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Do you
I
find
mean-
that some people find it better to do it
Nobody can do. Okay, so
I guess
it'd be really.
It'd be weird with some people,
But you actually bring up a really good point, and that is some like there's in particular one of the females that I train who's actually a very good lifter, but she has a tendency to do this with her underhand. So I'm glad you actually went to the trigger. Don't ever flex the arm in a deadlift. You're putting your biceps at huge risk. So if you notice it in yourself or in anybody that you're working with, if they're tending to do a bit of this at the top is where you'll see it. They'll also shrug it a little, but they'll pull in. What I try and work with those folks is to have them think about flexing their triceps. It also tends to bring a little bit more tension. It's hard to flex the triceps and not build a little bit more core tension, but as they dress the bar, flexing the triceps, straightening the arm. So, but to the grip, like nobody can deadlift maximally double underhand. Double overhand, if they can do like the pinch grip, so more like what they do with Oli, where you're, oh, what's the term? Hook, thank you. Like, it's painful. But you can numb off the nerves just by repeatedly doing it, but it's a death grip. I have not seen anybody let go because the hook failed. They did something else to fail the lift. I don't do hook grip. I do an unmatched over under.
Do you serve people over and then have them transition or no?
Yeah, like most folks when they're starting out, they're not at a weight that they are going to fail the grip. So if it ever gets to a point to where they're going to do, like if we've got somebody whose movement pattern's good and we're looking at, okay, if you're ready, we're ready to take some sub-maximal numbers for your training plan, then we'll, like let's talk about working an unmatched grip, or if they want to try hook, there's some folks that do hook grip, they can teach them that, and then get them into that, because you don't want the grip to be the failure point of the lift. Yes?
I just have a question. When you're in your starting position, if I put my hand on your lower back and your shoulder, where would you say the force would be coming from the start?
From where I feel it is actually right here.
Okay, because I've just always watched it be trained where if they get into that starting position and they'll put their hand on their back and put their back and say, I don't want any force coming up here, I want your butt coming up first.
Oh no.
And I've always wondered, like I don't know if you know why Bruce trains it that way, but I've always wondered if there's like something specific that I'm not catching or.
So just so I understand, are they saying that you do this first?
Yeah, so we'll like when you're starting, and put your hand on your back and
No
come
way.
up here and say, hey, now make sure you group from
No way.
butt up first. So
If
then-
your butt comes up first, so like that's counterintuitive to me. So unless I'm going to be doing like a Romanian deadlift or a relative stiff leg deadlift, okay. But if I'm doing a traditional deadlift and if I do this first, like I'm cooked. Where are my shoulders relative to the bar? Like I'm now past the bar. I don't ever want to be past the bar from here. So again, you bring up actually a really good point, and that is that alignment of the bar, shoulders and arms. So that if I'm here, like I'm almost behind the bar. Like I want to be in this kind of a position so that as I pull, I'm not getting out here, because again, biomechanically, that weight's getting heavier, 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 heavier. Whereas if I'm keeping it here, if it's X pounds, like it stays at X pounds because I'm in unison with that bar. So if I shoot my hips first, I will get the weight to here, and I will not be able to complete the lift at a max. There's no way.
Well, and what's moving the weight once you get, if the extension of the knee joint happens first, then where's the extension to get yourself upright?
Oh yeah.
Which,
You ever see that, Megan?
Oh yeah.
I
Well,
hear-
like at Bruce, well at Craven,
Yeah.
like
Like I've only seen
none of the
one.
people I
It's
work
just more
with
so
can
like
do
that have
deadlifts.
tension.
So.
unless he's trying to get something firing for a specific
Yeah.
reason.
I was always wondering, 'cause he's even told me like, hey, when you watch this, like make sure that's your cue that you can use with your.
And I would imagine that's not with heavy loads. I would,
Oh,
like,
Heavy for them.
heavy, so relatively heavy for them?
The first thing is when she gets into this position, it's so heavy that her background.
Yeah.
okay. Well, then it shouldn't be that heavy.
So you, and there's
Like
a
that's
I've just always wondered, like I've never done
Yeah.
it.
the first move in a traditional deadlift like should never be that.
But I know better than to ask.
So,
but
yeah.
just look at me. What
Yeah, I'm
happens,
not kidding.
right?
But it might be like maybe he's working on a firing issue, something like that,
There's a
right?
therapeutic indication.
Yeah.
Just from a competitive perspective to lift a weight, even from general training to execute a deadlift outside of a therapeutic or other reason, you don't want to shoot your hips first.
And I would say that doing a sumo lift, the advantage to a sumo lift is it takes your trunk from that tendency to be forward flexed and gets you way more upright. Look,
So, here.
look, is he not more upright?
Yeah.
So there's the sumo, and there's the appeal to me of sumo.
10% less shear at the
Yeah.
lumbar.
So now if Coach X is saying extend your knees first and stuff, they're doing the exact opposite, which
Yeah.
Well, he's not so much saying these, but just
So
like if
even-
he wants that butt coming up
first.
first.
Yeah.
But if for your butt to come up first has to be at the knees.
So
Swimmers.
Oh.
So if you're, depending, like this is where like when I first started, we started talking about deadlift, and that's hip height. Like my hips are super high.
And they
right?
should be.
Like I'm here, right? Like my hips are high. What you don't want to do is squat
No.
the deadlift. So if somebody is starting in a position where they're down here,
Different.
this is now a different story. I'm
Yeah.
squatting this deadlift.
Now his hips probably would fire first. Yeah.
Like I can't pull back.
Maybe he just has her starting over.
So this is where, like, to me, I would be trying to coach that person. Again, non-therapeutic, just for execution of the deadlift alone. I would be coaching that person to try and find that sweet spot of hip height and still not getting over the bar or wherever, right? So I'm in alignment and my hips are as high as possible.
Because at times I think we get mixed up when we take the squat mechanics and apply it to lifting something off the floor. And that's where your hip height is real low.
It'd be more for their like starting, right? Because if it's meant to be explosive, then you want it like. Mind you, they don't start like down here.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
start
They,
higher up, don't they?
This was before we started doing all the explosive stuff.
Oh.
We just started this.
but that's a great example though. And again, I am 99.99999% sure that Bruce is doing this for a reason, that he understands.
I'm trying to figure out what
He
the-
understands. But again, it's just there's application and justification and rationale. You might say, I still wouldn't do it, and that's fine. But again, absolutely. That's
Well,
fantastic.
Say my lens is, again, like execution of the deadlift. Not like
Not
all the
to do other
peripheral
things, yeah.
indications for a similar movement aside. Execution of the deadlift, I want my hips as high as I can be with still maintaining that position of my shoulders, arms, and bar, and that bar does not leave me once I make contact with it. So that when I'm done, I'm here, and I'm not here, it's
So like, I think it's just that since they're training for swimming specifically, maybe you guys have to starting as lower.
Maybe more for the starting blocks of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could have an application like that. So yeah, like,
I'm just trying to figure it out.
Or just go in there and say, Bruce, you're wrong.
Don't you dare. It's not guaranteed.
yeah, tell them I said. See what
Yeah.
He's digging in holes.
No.
I'll
I
ask him.
mean, like, so depending on the athletes that you're working with, like setting up, because not everybody can get into that position that I'm in.
Can I just sit on
So something that's really helpful.
Someone just like pushes off the wall.
If you have to go, because we are on, like, don't feel.
Oh yeah,
Like,
take off.
absolutely.
I could talk about this stuff for like days.
Well, maybe you got free time on Tuesday. You come back
So
and watch us.
somebody who can't get into proper hip position, start with an elevation of the, like, don't make everybody start from the floor. If they're having a problem with getting in that proper alignment, like, oh, now I can sit up beautifully. And again, for most athletes, again, if you're down here, they're probably out of the play. This is a completely acceptable position, good athletic position to be in right here. Nothing wrong with doing those as far as like a good, safe deadlift and still strengthening all the same muscles, slightly, like 2.5 inches difference. So on.
Awesome.
Cool.
And we're working on this on Tuesday.
We're working on it. So
Thank you.